Week 18 is by far one of the trickiest slates of the year. Every single year, it feels more like a preseason slate than it does a typical slate. But that just brings about so much opportunity for people who are paying attention, people who are ready to grind the information, to find those edges, because there are going to be edges, whether it's rookies who are buried on a depth chart normally who are going to get their opportunity, or whether it's guys chasing contract incentives. All of that comes into play. There are teams who absolutely have to win this week, and there are teams who have nothing to play for whatsoever. We're going to try and cover it as much as possible over the next 20 minutes as we talk all things fantasy game day in week 18. If you haven't already used the code TFS23 for a free second entry when you sign up, it is the perfect way to enjoy the playoffs with a little more sweat on the line. Rich, how are you feeling about week 18?
Yeah, I get really excited for this because I feel like this is one of those weeks that it's carnage, it's chaos. You can't just look at, who's good, who's not. You need to do some work to it. And whenever there's a chance to have to do work, that appeals to me because I always feel like there's an opportunity to try and get an edge. So, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of dive in and look at who we could potentially be looking for here.
Yeah, I love that. And it's absolutely that kind of case that if you're willing to grind the edges and work hard, then in these kind of slates, you can take advantage of the people who show up, throw together a lineup, and don't even realize that some of the players they're putting in lineups probably aren't going to be playing. Stephen, appreciate you checking us out tonight. Best 20 minutes of your day. Best 20 minutes of our day hanging out with you. Super sharp guy, Stephen. So let's start with the captain picks like we always do. And this week, there will be huge value in the captain picks and getting it right because look, it could be a slate with subdued scoring because of the amount of teams that don't have anything to play for, because of the amount of players playing who aren't particularly good. I mean, like the Eagles are looking like they could be down to their third string quarterback. You could be looking at a Bills side with Mitch Trubisky playing. There are going to be a lot of players who aren't capable of putting up the points that we normally lean into. So finding captain picks who've got something to play for is going to be essential. Bijan Robinson at £8,000. Rich, what is it about this matchup with the Panthers that makes you want to jam Bijan in at this price?
I think basically every week we talk about the captain's pick, and there's basically a pool of about 8 studs, isn't there, that you can week in, week out rely on a good. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're all on either the Saturday games or Sunday Night Football. So the captain's choices are very slim. And basically the one stud that is both playing in a game that means something and has the potential to really blow up is Bijan Robinson. So yeah, we know that the Falcons are going to be going full out to try and win. There's a small chance they can still make the playoffs. If they win and Tampa Bay loses, they're in. So yeah, Bijan stud, been playing really well. This offense, since Michael Penix has come in, it's kind of opened things up for Bijan a little bit. We've seen a little bit more play action. We've seen a little bit more kind of sprints and kind of some boots and things like that with Penix. That means Bijan can get some more advantageous runs, get in space a little bit more, and utilize that insane athleticism and agility that we know he's got. So, yeah, really like it. Yes, 8,000 is expensive when you're talking captain picks, but as you said, subdued scoring. There's no real superstars. I feel like you've got to have at least one Bijan lineup this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if we're looking at a pure points per pound projection, I mean, you're hoping for what, like about a 24-point score, which is going to translate to about 48, 50 points or so by the time they've doubled at your captain position. Well, Bijan Robinson, since week 9 onwards, has been the RB2 overall in PPR formats, averaged 21.3 points per game, 4th in rushing yards per game, 2nd most rushing touchdowns, averaging 4 more touches per game than he did over the first half of the season. The Panthers, they've allowed 10 different running backs to score enough points to finish as top 12 backs against them. They've allowed Bijan Robinson to score 25.5 points against them in week 6. Bucky Irving had 190 total yards against them last week. I just don't think that there's any way that the Panthers can stop him. They've been awful against the run all year and a team that we want to target. Let's move over to our second player, though, Jonathan Taylor, who is absolutely somebody that I really like this weekend. Again, not the cheapest at 7,200, but that's not something we should be concerned about when we're talking about our captain picks. I think that a lot of people are going to see Joe Flacco starting for the Colts this weekend and rush to play Josh Downs and Michael Pittman in that kind of mid-range wide receiver range. Now, it is two teams, the Colts and the Jags, who have nothing to play for. What is it that makes you feel good about Jonathan Taylor in this matchup when they've got nothing on the line?
The fact that he's averaged over 33 points a game over the last 2 weeks probably has
It
something
seems
to do
good.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, this is a little bit nervy. You know, I don't love starting guys that aren't motivated to play and win. You know, the Colts don't have anything on the line. They're out the playoffs. That makes me a little bit nervous. But look, Jonathan Taylor's playing incredibly well right now. And I think that in this week, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And if that means starting someone like Jonathan Taylor that's got a little bit of a question mark over him, I think other people are going to be scared off. So plug him in. As you said, £800 cheaper than Bijan. It feels like a decent flyer at that sort of point.
Yeah, as you mentioned, massive amount of points totals over the last couple of weeks, 39.8 points and then 27.6 points. The Jags, they've allowed the second most fantasy points to the running back position. They've allowed 10 different running backs to finish as top 12 options against them. I just think that Jonathan Taylor is going to be a far better option than the passing game this weekend. Let's move over, though, to the stacks of the week. We've got some pretty funky suggestions in here with things getting quite funky this week. But we're going to start with the Bo Nix and the Broncos. Cortland Sutton. It's simple for the Broncos. They simply have to win. Otherwise, it's time to start looking at travel agents and flying off to Cancun next week or something. If they win, they're in the playoffs. They're playing against the Chiefs team, who are starting nearly all of their backups for resting a huge swathe of players. Bo Nix, he's been impressive this year. He wasn't incredible last time these two teams met, but do you think that without Chris Jones, without Trent McDuffie, and all of the players on offense, that Bo Nix can do enough to take the Broncos into the playoffs?
I think so. I think, you know, he needs to. I think, as you said, this defense is pretty depleted with all those studs starting. You know, yes, I want to say Jalen Watson has just come back off IR,
Yeah.
the other corner who's fantastic, but he's come back off IR first week back. I don't know if I'm necessarily expecting him to do fantastic things. The Broncos are one of the few teams that you can say we know they're going to have everything going for this game. They need to win to get in. Bo Nix has been great. He's a different player to where he was beginning of the season when these two teams played. And I think that, yeah, it's not an expensive stack when you're talking 12,400 for a QB and a wide receiver that could potentially break open the slate.
Yeah, and it's just that motivation factor just means so much in this situation. Bo Nix coming off 2 21-point or above games over the last 2 weeks. I think there's plenty which we can rely on here. And if it was Chiefs normally, maybe I'd be a little bit concerned, but Nick still put up 16.1 points against them last time they met. So very much in on this one. I think you can build plenty of fun stuff around that and have a nice, safe core. Moving over to the 49ers, Josh Dobbs, the Pastronaut, gets a revenge game against the Cardinals, who he was with for like 8 games last year. Josh Dobbs is one of those kind of players who gives you a little bit with his legs. He averaged 17.7 points per game through his 7 games with the Cardinals last year, then went on to play for the Vikings after he was traded, and in his 4 full games for the Vikings had 17.9 points. Everybody knows what kind of player Dobbs is. He can be streaky, he can be ineffective at times, but he can also get the ball to the players who need it. Juwan Jennings is 77 yards away from 1,000 yards, I believe, and Kyle Shanahan talked about that yesterday, about how he would like to get him to that point. Do you think that this stack is one which we should be targeting, or do you think I'm kind of hanging on to Juwan Jennings' incentives a little too much here?
No, I think it's a very valid point. I mean, to take viewers behind the curtain, you and I sort of discussed this earlier, and I said, look, I really like Josh Dobbs, but I don't love a stack option basically for him. And then you point out the Juwan Jennings things, and it's like, yeah, that makes too much sense not to. You know, this is a guy that in Juwan Jennings who has been the kind of dirty work guy over the past few years. He's been that third and Juwan and has always been there for Shanahan. So this is him kind of paying him back and giving him that little bit of incentive to hit that 1,000 yards. And look, Josh Dobbs last year, he had 5 games over 20 fantasy points. We know what he can do. He's going to run the ball. He's going to be, use those legs. And anytime you can have a quarterback at 4,200 on game day, it always makes it intriguing because you're talking 12, 13 points to pay off their price. Like if he can have a 15-point game, which is well within the range of outcomes, he's having a great performance for you. If you can get this stack, as you said, Nix and Sutton isn't an expensive stack. Well, this is almost £3,000 cheaper. Like that's a big difference on this slate. So yeah, I'm very intrigued at this.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of difference between the two stacks is that if you went with something like this rather than the Nix and Sutton, suddenly you start being able to look at a more comfortable way to fit both Bijan and Jonathan Taylor into your lineup rather than having to choose one of them. So there's definitely a lot of ways you can attack it. Staying with stacks that maybe are slightly unexpected to pop up on this slate. We'll get there in a minute, but first, I want one more good stack, which is one which I'm going to be playing because, look, it's my guy, Drake London. Mags, I don't care what you're saying. The idea that Drake London has been a disappointment this year is absolutely wild. Drake London set career highs in virtually every single metric that we would care about, as well as being the wide receiver 9 in total points. Michael Penix, he's yet to hit 12 points in a single game, which does make this one a little scary, and that's why he's down at 4,600. But the Panthers, they've allowed the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. Their defense ranks 30th against the pass in DVOA. Rich, have you seen enough on tape from Penix to believe that he can be a viable fantasy asset at this point in the season, or do you want to see more from him and push this into next year?
I always want to see more, but yeah, I think he's been competent. I think he's been good enough for Drake London, which is really all we care about, isn't it? In this world, look, he's priced so cheap at 4,600. I think he can get there. 15 points is a good day for him. I also think this is kind of intriguing. If you wanted to build a slightly different lineup where you're very balanced across your entire thing, you could potentially talk yourself into captaining Drake London here as well. If you want to get away from those two expensive running backs, maybe try and play leverage elsewhere, captain Drake London, go with Michael Penix, and then that gives you so much money to spend elsewhere that you could build a really nice balanced roster.
Yeah, and the Falcons, they absolutely have to win. They need the Bucks to lose their game against the Saints, and the Falcons have to beat the Panthers to have any chance of getting into the playoffs. So it's a game that I want to be in on. The Falcons are tripped over their own feet at times, but I do believe they'll have enough here. Drake London's at a 29% or higher target share in 3 of the last 5 games. He's 10 catches away from 100 receptions on the year. Lots to like about that. And like you say, I'd rather take a little bit of the known quantity with Michael Penix than sometimes taking a complete dart throw on someone like Mitch Trubisky this weekend. Speaking of dart throws, Carson Wentz, 4,400. Carson Steele, 2,200. Juju Smith-Schuster, 2,200. And Justin Watson, 2,200. There are all kinds of bargain basement options looking at the Chiefs this week, who take on a Broncos defense who have everything to play for. Is there a particular way that you would want to attack this game if you were going to try and get some exposure to it?
I feel like this is you humoring me and allowing me to be slightly silly. But look, I come into this and I think, look, if you're Andy Reid, okay, you are one of the best coaches in NFL history. You're one of the best offensive play callers, but you're not getting the credit because Patrick Mahomes gets a lot of the credit right now. I think that he gets a lot of enjoyment of scheming things up and getting to run offenses with bad quarterbacks. This is a guy that led Chad Henne to 2 playoff victories. Like, I don't think this is a Chiefs team. Yes, they are resting absolutely everyone, but I don't think this is a team that's just going to roll over and play dead and allow the Broncos to walk into the playoffs. This is, they're a division rival. And I just think that this is a really intriguing way. I'm wondering if there's a world where we could get some really interesting leverage play out of this Chiefs, and they're so cheap. Like, look, Justin Watson, 1 deep shot, and he's paid off his price. Carson Steele, it looks like he's going to be the lead back. It seems like Pacheco and Hunt aren't going to play. That's almost a must start there, whatever lineup you're building, just based on the volume that he could see. And then Juju, power slot. I just think it could be fun. I don't know if I necessarily want to go all 4 pieces in a lineup, but I could definitely see me sprinkling in lots of Carson Steele, and then maybe a little bit of a Watson or Juju with a Wentz stack.
Yeah, I think that's probably how I'd get to it. It would be looking at Carson Steele, particularly if those two sit, as you say. I think that there's plenty of opportunities there, or potentially looking at Carson Wentz. I mean, this is a guy who has done a decent amount of rushing over times, not massive amounts, but kind of similar to Trevor Lawrence, where you're getting between 20 to 28 yards, 30 yards per game at times. And if Carson Wentz starts scrambling around, then at 4,400, it won't take a huge amount to pay off. Juju Smith-Schuster would probably be my lean over Justin Watson, just because I think Wentz can be so erratic downfield. And, if you've got Patrick Surtain shadowing the outside receivers, I think I'd probably lean towards the inside. But I don't hate it. I was just a little surprised when you suggested it. And it's something which I'll play with over the weekend and see how it looks when I start building lineups.
I'm always looking for value wherever I can.
Okay. Well, let's get to value in a bit, but first let's go to our favorite plays, starting with Zach Charbonnet, 5,600. Last week against the Chicago Bears was incredibly disappointing for Zach Charbonnet. That was the prime matchup. The Bears have been a team we've attacked on the ground all year long, and Zach Charbonnet had a miserable 10.6 PPR points. Charbonnet, though, he did still see a 72% opportunity share. This week, he plays against the Rams, who ranked 22nd in run defense DVOA. They've already confirmed they're going to be resting a bunch of their starters. The Seahawks have got nothing to play for but pride. Do you think that's enough to see a good game out of Zach Charbonnet, or do you think we should maybe be looking at the guys behind Zach Charbonnet and wondering if they're the real value plays this week?
No, I think if this was, Kenneth Walker, then maybe we'd be looking behind. But I think this is a guy that is essentially a backup looking to try and earn a bigger share of the workload for next year. And I think the divisional games, it means a lot. It's not just playing a random team. It means a lot to McDonald to try and get one over Sean McVay. It means a lot to the Seahawks to not be the team that lost to the Rams when they were playing all the backups. This is a defense that has got a great pass rush, but is a little bit weak down the middle. And if they're resting guys, let's get after them. I think that also the way this slate is looking, I'm really struggling for options in this kind of £5,000 to £6,000 range. I don't know about you, Tom, but when I put together these key plays, Zach Charbonnet was basically the only guy in this range other than Drake London, who we've already talked about. So when you're building lineups, it feels like you almost need someone like a Zach Charbonnet just to give you that kind of mid-tier pricing, because otherwise you're building an entire lineup of studs and scrubs.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely reason to be optimistic about the Seahawks in general. They've got a bunch of incentives they can hit. Geno Smith needs about 180 passing yards to hit. I think it's like £1 million bonus or something like that.
He can get 3 million total if he hits all of his incentives, which are reasonably achievable.
Yeah, that's it. All his incentives are based on his numbers that he put up 2 years ago. And so if he can hit 180 passing yards, that's going to bag him a nice amount of money. Jackson Smith-Njigba needs 4 catches to get 100 receptions. DK Metcalf needs 61 receiving yards to hit 1,000 yards. Ryan Grubb said yesterday, if it's within your power, you're going to try and make that come to life and create as many opportunities for those guys as possible. So even though they're not Charbonnet, and Charbonnet doesn't have any incentives we know about, I feel like this is an offense that wants to go out there. They want to put up numbers and want to move the ball. And I don't think that the Rams are going to be particularly difficult for them to do it against. Moving on to our next players, though, it is the key enablers, the budget players. And one of them is an LA Ram, Tutu Atwell, who I think is probably one of the pump plays of the week. Rich, you've been a Tutu truther for a long time, so I'll let you fire away on Tutu first.
Hey, look, any chance I get an opportunity to talk about Tutu, I'm going to. Look, no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. Do we know that Jimmy G can push the ball downfield and take some shots? Tutu Atwell is going to stretch the field. I think this game, I believe, is going to be reasonably high scoring. I think it's worthwhile taking a punt. Tutu could, at 2,200, it's literally one catch. One downfield shot, one catch, and he's paid off his price. You always say 8 points is what you're looking for these guys. I think he's going to see 5-6 targets plus potentially some manufactured touches in the screen or kind of run game. I think it could be really, really interesting. Have a good ceiling, but also a solid floor with it as well.
Yeah, like I say, I love this one. You go back to earlier this year when Tutu was playing a good amount, when Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua, who are both confirmed to be out for this game, when they were injured, Tutu played 4 games where he saw over 50% of the snaps, and he scored over 11.3 PPR points in all of them, averaged 12.3 points. I would be very assured that Tutu's going to end up in double-digit PPR points this week again. Tyler Johnson with the Rams at 2,200. So Rich, which way are you leaning? Tyler Johnson or Tutu? Which one's the better play?
I think Tutu's a better play, but I also think that a lot of people are going to be on Tutu. So, if you're looking for leverage off that, I think Tyler Johnson, he's going to play the majority of snaps. He's a little bit different type of player. He's not going to be that downfield manufactured touch threat. I think he could see some solid volume in that kind of intermediate area of the field. I'd rather go with Tutu, but I think it's worth calling out both of them, to be honest.
Yeah, Tyler Johnson kind of started the season strongly. There was that point where I was expecting Demarcus Robinson to start the year in those 3 wide receiver sets, or Jordan Whittington to have really strong usage. And it was Tyler Johnson who started with 7-5, 79 against the Lions, and then followed it up with like 3 target games, 4 target games, and then it's faded away a little bit at times. But I definitely like this one as well. And look, if you're looking to onslaught one game and say this is where all the points are, take Geno, take JSN, DK, or Charbonnet, and then run it back with Tutu and Tyler Johnson, and you'll still be able to find enough money to fit in a couple of studs. Kenneth Gainwell, 2,200. Now, this one, I think that it's worth mentioning that Will Shipley is the one that a lot of people are suggesting could see a bulk of the work. But Kenneth Gainwell, in my opinion, is the more accomplished running back. The Eagles have liked him better all season and used him more reliably. Do you think that Kenneth Gainwell will see enough snaps to justify this 2,200 price tag?
I hope so. I really like Kenneth Gainwell as a player, and it could be that the Eagles like him, and that's the reason why he's not going to see the bulk of the work, because they want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. But I think, look, this is a guy who sat there, watched Saquon do what he's done all year, and it's hardly toted the rock. Like they need to give him some carries. I think this is a great opportunity to feed him the ball. And look, at 2,200, even if he only plays a half, he's probably going to pay off that price.
Yeah, I like that one. I think it's one where a lot of people will be very keen to play Will Shipley because he's been getting that kind of coach speak this week, and because he's a rookie who's had 20 touches all season, if that. But whoever gets touches against the Giants can absolutely go for points. The Giants have been miserable against run all year. They'll have 4th most fantasy points. They rank 14th in run defense DVOA, but they just end up giving up so much points because people just do what they want against them, really. So very much interested in that one. I think that's one which I'd use in the larger field ones rather than the smaller field like the 25, where you don't need to be as different because there's less people in there. Lastly, Joe Flacco, 4,200. I mean, this could be Joe Flacco's last game in the NFL. Anthony Richardson deemed not healthy enough after his back spasms issue that he's been dealing with for the last couple of weeks. For me, it feels like we could have possibly seen Anthony Richardson play his last game in a Colts jersey. This one,
Wow.
more than likely, Joe Flacco's last game in a Colts jersey before riding off into the sunset. But against the Jags, who are just piss poor on every single level, ranked 32nd on pass defense. They've allowed the 2nd most points to quarterbacks, the 9th most to wide receivers, the 7th most to tight ends. Is this as simple as Joe Flacco, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, and just ride off into the sunset with Joe?
Yeah, look, Joe Flacco's been so fun over the last 3-4 years as a fantasy option that you kind of got to have a punt on him in his last ever career game, probably. Like, great value at 4,200. A Joe Flacco Josh Downs stat cost you £8,000. Like, that's £400 less than Baker Mayfield cost you on his own. It's a great punt. As you said, it's a dream matchup. The Jags play a huge amount of man coverage. Josh Downs eats man coverage for breakfast. I think Joe Flacco is going to force feed him the ball, and that we know that Joe Flacco's not going to die trying, is he? He's going to push the ball around. He's not going to wonder what's going to happen. He's going to leave it all out there, and you want to have at least one Joe Flacco lineup this week, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout, and I think it will be a fun one. Whereas, like some of these games, there's no obvious angle where you can go, well, that team needs this, like Houston, Tennessee. Who needs a performance there? Like, you've got Will Levis, who maybe needs to save his job, but it's a bit bland. You've got Buffalo playing Mitch Trubisky against Drake May. Nobody really wants, like, the Patriots don't want to win that game. Buffalo just want to get out healthy. And there's loads of these little games around this weekend where you just look at it and go, that's a bit meh. But Joe Flacco, if this is going to be his last game, and he'll be treating it as potentially his last game because he treated last year with the Browns as potentially his last year, you can latch onto that, find the motivation, and build yourself a narrative. And I think it is definitely a fun way to attack it. And that will bring us to the end of the show. Everything that we've kind of gone over there is a tricky slate. If you want to learn more about it or even just talk more about it with us, jump in our Discord. You can find the link over on Twitter or on our main channel. Hit the join button. We've got Rich's Fantasy Game Day projections, my write-ups, and loads of details in there to try and get you set for this weekend, as well as a lot of people talking about how they're going to attack each and every slate. Truly appreciate everyone hanging out with us. We'll be going through the playoffs all the way up to the Super Bowl and Fantasy Game Day. Make sure you check back in, and we will catch you next time.